Yay! It is finally here. Training number 3, the promised land. This is where we're going to bring it all together. All right. So, what you've learned to date has given you the possibility, right? In training number 1, you understood what the field of resistance is and how it affects all of us. And what we're taught as young people that contributes to our field of resistance, right? We have all of this information coming at us, and it definitely affects how we are working in the world, how we play in the world. And then in training number 2, finding flow, you start to understand really what was happening around you that was causing you to start rejecting yourself. And it's this self-rejection that can cause a lot of resistance in our field of resistance. And ultimately, by dissipating this field of resistance, this is where we get all of the abundance that the universe, that the divine is flowing to us coming in. And so today we're going to wrap it all up, and you're going to learn all 5 rules of receiving. These rules of receiving are really what show you how the ecosystem of receiving and giving works, so that you can bring yourself into balance, so that you can experience more abundance in the world, that you can be able to talk to the other side of the veil, whether you want to talk to your spirit guides or angels, whatever it is. This is where it all happens when we bring in all these rules. All right, so if you're new to me, hey, I'm your host, Patty Lennon. I'm the one that's been with you through this training. You heard my story in training number 1, but what I wanted to share a little bit about myself, which we didn't really talk about through the training, is, how I came to this work. So I was in banking. I was a corporate banker for 15 years and left that profession to what I thought was going to be career counseling, but found myself much more drawn to first business coaching. And then finally, as I told you in training number 1, I had the awareness of all the magic that was happening as people learned to receive, and that my guides told me to put my time, love, and attention on the receiving school. Now, when I left banking, I did get a master's in psychology. So I do ground what I teach here, not just with the spiritual piece of it, but also with the brain science, right? That's what we're always working with, is bringing our brain in as our friend to go through our world, because a lot of the spiritual and personal development work out there, even the stuff I was trained in, tries to bypass the mind, either with spiritual bypassing, psychological bypassing, and we don't want to do that. We want to integrate, right? We want to get the brain on board, and that's what we're going to talk about today in the context of all of these rules. Okay, so here's what you can expect to learn today. What we're going to talk about is, as you heard these trainings specifically, I talked you through Wendy's story. I'm imagining you came to the place of saying, well, it can't just be that it's all receiving, right? I've got to do some things in here. And the answer is yes, you're right. And in rule number 5, you're going to learn how to find that balance of what to do and what not to do, when you have to be in action, when you need to be in receptivity, or when it's optimal. You are also going to learn on this training how actual things in your physical space can affect the resistance, this field of resistance. You are going to learn what it means to take care of yourself fully. And then what happens in your communication with your spirit guides and angels when that is the case. So if you've been wondering, how do I learn to communicate with the other side of the veil more? Like, what actually do I need to do? You'll find that it's actually what you need to stop doing. And we'll talk more about that in number 4, in rule number 4, learn your language. So with that, I'm going to hop back and forth between slides as we need it. And I do want to introduce you to the 5 rules of receiving, so you understand where we are right now. So the 5 rules of receiving. Rule number 1 is receive everything that comes from the outer world. Number 2 is receive yourself. Now, this is the one we dove deep into in the last training. The 3rd is declutter and make space. The 4th is learn your language. And the final rule is to do your 100%. So we're going to talk about all of those. But for now, let's just talk about the field of resistance, right? We talked about the universe, and you are here on the planet, and the universe is always ready to give to you. All you need to do is ask, and it'll be on its way. The only problem is resistance. So during this training, you're going to learn more how to dissipate that field of resistance with those 5 rules of receiving. And as you lower your field of resistance, your abundance will flow in. So what is the very first rule of receiving? The first rule of receiving is receive the outer world. Now, this is one that I find can be super confusing for people. When they hear, oh, receive everything, what people normally tell me is, yes, I'm open, I'm ready for my abundance to come in. And the thing is, receive everything from the outer world means, yes, receive all the good stuff and receive the challenging stuff. And this is where it gets a little tricky, right? This is where it gets a little uncomfortable, because we want the good stuff coming in, but when something comes in that triggers us or is uncomfortable to us, we try and push it away. We don't want to see it because we feel like if we receive it, that we will somehow bless it and make it permanent. But what actually happens as you receive the difficult stuff, you actually release the resistance to it, which means it has the ability to flow out of your life as easily as it came in. Now, this is a great starting point, especially now that you've done the work on receiving yourself, because this is something that you can feel into right now, right? There's things coming to you from every piece of your experience. And some of them are beautiful and we take them for granted. And some of them are difficult and we push them away. And so we want to shift that and change that. So what does that mean? Well, let's start with the good stuff. Things like compliments, things like small gifts. You know, every day as I work with people in this concept, what I'll hear from someone is, someone offered me a trip, someone offered me money, someone offered me fill in the blank, and I felt guilty receiving it. I felt guilty accepting it, right? And the thing is, immediately, you're probably not going to shift to suddenly feeling like, yes, give me everything. If you've been trained to sort of resist gifts that come from outside yourself. But what you could start to do is just lower your reaction to it, lower your reaction of resistance. And what does that mean? It means as it comes in, you're going to see yourself kind of trying to stop. Just don't, right? It may be uncomfortable at first. You may just have to like bite your tongue to not reject the gift, but you just allow it in. And as you get used to allowing it in, what will start to happen is that your mind will suddenly realize that your reason for resisting it originally, which was you didn't want to look like a greedy person or a selfish person, all of a sudden that starts to shift, right? Your brain will start to realize it's safe to receive, that nothing bad happened, and in fact, something really good happened by receiving. Now, the other piece of that puzzle is the stuff that's challenging. And we saw some of that come up in the Q&As. We talked a little bit about that happening for people. And this, to me, is the game changer and that I see the very first place where people really start to see a shift in the receiving school is as they're going through the activities, which this is the rule we start with. They'll say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much I resist what's going on around me. And so I'm going to put a scenario in front of you. you're out in the supermarket, let's say, and or a store, and you observe someone being unkind to the cashier, to the checkout person, right? They're being aggressive. Think about how you experience that event. Most likely, if you're like most of us, the first thing is you'll have some anger or some triggers bubbling up. And then what will happen is you'll start to make a story about that person, or you'll walk away. In some way, you will try to change the discomfort you're having in that situation. And yet, if you just allow what's coming to flow, that is actually what will help you release it. Now, you may be thinking, well, Patty, if I'm observing bad behavior, I should do something about it. Like maybe you feel that way. That's possible, right? Doesn't mean it's required, but it's possible. But where you're going to get to right action at that point is going to let yourself receive the truth about the scenario to you. I'll give you another example. Maybe you have someone in your life who's very difficult, and they keep trying to get in touch with you, and you make up reasons and you make up excuses and you try and convince yourself to you find them agreeable or make a scenario with them less problematic, right? Maybe you try and convince yourself, well, we've had a long friendship. This is one that's come up in the group a lot this week, is a long-term friendship that just doesn't feel good to you anymore. Letting that information in is what lets you get to the next place of tapping into your intuition. We'll get more into that when we talk about rule number 4, learning your language. But first, allowing yourself to see how you truly respond to things around you, to actually feel them coming at you. If you're a sensitive person at first, this can be really challenging. But what will happen is the more you do that, the more you'll actually understand that you feel safer in those situations. Because once you start receiving the truth about them, that's when you're able to take action on them. Now there's someone that I want to tell you about that this particular rule made a huge difference in her life, Joanna. So Joanna had put this warning, a very long post: miracles are showing up one by one. A kitchen in a dream location became available for her to rent. Now, she took this training 2 years ago, I want to say. And then she was just in the receiving school this last spring. And so when she first took the training, what had happened to her is she had been in a really difficult job. She had a boss that was not good to her. And she was actually hoping she could receive a pay raise by doing this work. What happened was she found a job in a completely different industry. It was her dream industry that she didn't even realize she was qualified for. She became a pastry assistant chef. Over the last year, she's been promoted to head chef. And then while she was doing this particular work of receiving everything, which included receiving the fact that her husband wasn't always as supportive of her as she would like to think, as she wanted. She had made excuses sometimes for, the lack of support that she got. Once she started to allow that truth in, other things were able to come in with it. And why is that? Because as we start to realize that we need things like support, like cheerleaders, as we start to see that, that's when we allow in all of the goodness the universe has for us that matches those needs. So here's what she says: miracles are showing up one by one. A kitchen in a dream location became available to rent. So besides being promoted to a pastry chef at a country club, she decided to start her own business because she had time to do both. At work, where I was promoted this year, I'm appreciated and informed I will be offered a significant raise. I was given an amazing opportunity to sell my baked goods at a bakery at a historic village. Then separately, she put a post on, and this was about another week later, that she realized that the carpet needed to be shampooed. She came home and her 19-year-old had done it. Now, if you guys have teenagers, you know how amazing that is, right? And all of that because it started with her really receiving that, hey, I don't actually get what I need from the people in my house. And that can be really uncomfortable. But once you start to allow it in, it also allows in the gifts that look like it. And you give the universe a lot more opportunity to work with. Okay, so now we will move on to rule number 2. And if you guys have any questions about rule number 1, just drop them in.